Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Zero to Empire podcast. On this episode, I have David Duncavage, and he's an executive coach, and he's going to be going over his story of actually going from West Point to being a monk to actually a tech executive to a coach. So, David, how did that journey unfold?
Well, like everything in life, it's a journey, right? And while I was at West Point, I really liked. I played football there, really good at football. Liked the summer training, jump training, special forces training, all that good stuff. But then I started questioning a lot of things. Had a lot of questions in my mind, so I went on a retreat to a Trappist monastery in Massachusetts, and I met the abbot Thomas Keating, and it was a life that was totally different than a monastery, but very similar, very regimented. A lot of the older monks were World War II vets, I found out, or Korean vets, Korean War vets. It's a life, the Trappists live a life pretty much of silence and solitude, tons of meditation and prayer. So Thomas taught me how to meditate, and I started meditating. That kind of fire started everything. So when I graduated, I was an army, I was infantry officer, then I became a finance officer. And then when I got my discharge, I finally just became a monk for several years. So,
Yeah, that's really cool. And how did that go to you becoming a coach today?
well, that's a little longer story because I left the monastery. I went to Japan, and I joke with people. I went to Japan with a backpack and a bamboo flute, and came back with a wife, a baby, and a whole lot of junk. But when I was in Japan, I started a couple businesses, a consulting company working for U.S. companies, Japanese companies, trying to get them together at the bargaining table, that kind of stuff. Then when I met my wife, we started I did the consulting part and she did the school part because she was a professional teacher. And then I also wound up coaching football in Japan, American football at Ritsumeikan University. I got kind of hoodwinked into that by my friend who ran a Japanese pub. He was a football player, and one day I walked in there, and the dean of the university was there, and they need help. They need help. So I said, okay. So, which was a riot. I had a kick doing that. Then I came back to the States, got a master's degree in theology from the Jesuits, the North American theology in Boston, and then got accepted to Harvard to do doctoral studies. And at that time, someone out of the blue, Texas Instruments contacted me. They're looking for somebody with a military background who could speak Japanese and had an engineering degree. Well, that was kind of me. So I wound up accepting that, leaving Harvard. And I wound up going to Japan. My wife stayed in Boston because the kids were, just starting school and stuff. So I was back and forth. I lived on airplanes basically. Um, and so I did that for 25 some odd years. And in my last business company, I did a turnaround of a company that was about 13 years old with another West Pointer. And we got the ship righted, got it profitable. And then the CEO, I was the COO and the CTO, we all decided it's time for us to part ways. They wanted to go in a different direction. That's fine. And that's when people said, Dave, why don't you be a coach? And I never thought about it because that's kind of what I was doing in the company anyway with people. My door was always open. I told people I should have been the chief psychiatric officer of the company. but so that's so I kind of fell into it. I never had this thing, I'm going to become a coach, although I was a football coach and a bunch of other things. But when you're a leader in a company, you are really a coach. So I'll stop there because I know we have a lot of other things to cover. So
That's awesome, and I'm glad that you had that global experience going to Japan, being a monk. That's all very unique and must have taught you a lot. So, what actually surprised you the most from transitioning from managing teams to coaching individuals?
that's a really good question. The reason I think it's good is that if you're really going to be a leader, you've got to go beyond the managing teams. That's part of it. You really, you're really working on developing individual leaders in the organization for them to take a hold of the team. You're setting directions. So this is me more than anything. I spent an enormous amount of time with each individual in the company. I had an open door, all my direct reports, and I had everything basic in the company at that time. We had weekly one-on-ones. I went down into the organization, had that. So it's not so much managing a team. You're helping the team learn to manage themselves. One of the biggest challenges, I think, young business owners or young CEOs who start up with a great technology is they've got to learn how to pass the baton. I worked for a wonderful person after TI in a company in Boston, and he started a company in his basement, and it grew. We wound up selling. They wound up selling it for, I don't know, $500,000 or something like that. And then later on, he was kind of like something I always called when I had problems and stuff. And he told me the biggest fear he had in his life as running a company was letting go. He said, but you really need to learn to do that. You got to pass that baton on to the next generation. So, and that all starts with who you are as a person. So that's my look at it. It's not that you're managing teams and now you're managing individuals. No, it's always individuals. Teams are a collection of individuals, not this amorphous mass. So.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. So when it comes to your ideal clients today, who are they and why are they the best fit for your coaching style?
Well, that itself was kind of a little coaching journey because we talked about some other questions when we spoke before about what were the biggest aha moments for me in coaching is I didn't realize how interested people were in mindfulness and meditation. I had no clue. I mean, I knew people in the company were, and we talked about it. But when I started looking at the number of really accomplished CEOs like Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, all these guys, a number of people doing it. So I really got into why people are so interested in it. And so I did a series of like 7 or 8 month workshops with CEOs. A lot of people were grads at service academies, and just trying to explain it because there's a lot of stuff going out there. There's so many different ways of doing it. And when I was a monk, I spent an awful lot of time working with Zen Buddhists. I actually did some training with Zen Buddhism when I was a Catholic monk. I was encouraged by the bishop of the local area to do this, so I jumped into it big time and learned an awful lot. And at Harvard, it was basically I was dealing with world religions, primarily Buddhism, Hinduism, and stuff like that, and Christianity, and Judaism. So it's a very complicated. First of all, it's very, very simple, but it's also very complicated when we put certain types of meanings to it or certain types of hopes or aspirations. Like you're going to be peaceful and the birds are going to fly around and you're in la la land, and that's not what it's about at all. I try to tell people it's kind of like athletic training. The early Christian monks in the desert, we're talking 2nd, 3rd, 4th century, that's where the word ascesis came from. It's basically the word Greek athletes used to train. So they looked at spiritual practice as a practice. I think they may have had a more holistic understanding of the human being than we do right now, in some way or shape or another. So it's like lifting weights. You don't lift weights and expect right after you finish lifting weights, you're all of a sudden immediately stronger, or you practice playing football and all of a sudden you got it. It takes time. And that seems to have struck a bell with a lot of people, because people come to me and say, I can't stop thinking. I said, what in the hell do you want to do that for? It's not the thinking's not the problem. It's being attached to what's happening. Every day when our conscious mind, about 6,000 thoughts, we have no control, just pop up. A lot of them are repetitive, a lot of them are historical, whatever. And the problem we have is we begin identifying with these thoughts, and they cause different emotions and different neural pathways in the brain. And we get angry, we get sad, we get depressed. And what meditation teaches you is to recognize them, not repress them. That's the worst thing to do. Repressing a thought is like you hit it with a hammer, and now you got 20 thoughts. So you don't repress anything, you just recognize it and just move on. And in time, that gives you the ability to think a little more clearly the world around you and the people, most importantly, the people around you. You can finally start listening to people. And that's a key thing for leaders, to be able to listen to people. And that's not just me. You could read stuff General Patton wrote and MacArthur and all these people that are they all say the same thing. So I went a little off your question there, but
Yeah, that's very insightful and very informative as well. And so, how do you actually go about helping tech innovators become actual business leaders?
well, first I want to understand. Well, I've got different charts we work on and stuff like that to find out what their technology is and where they want to go with it. There are a lot of great technologies out there that never went anywhere. So and sales has changed dramatically, I think, over the past, I don't know, 15, 20 years, where you're not selling widgets anymore. Tech sales is more consultative. It's a consultative sale where you're working with a client. That's why the Agile Scrum in software. The last company I was with, I changed all our software development to Agile Scrum because you're bringing the customer right into it, rather than doing the old waterfall tech where you have this software project and you do it for 2 years. At the end of 2 years, you go, whoops, that's not what the market wants. So you're constantly working with people, put customers part of it, and it's also kind of brilliant in a way that the customer begins to own the process with you, and you could wind up with a much, much better product. So that's a big thing I try to get with the young tech guys is when it's just like a 2 or 3 of them, and they're starting to expand. That's a very critical point because they've got to be able to hand the baton off. And a lot of them think, oh, I want to be a CEO and all stuff like that. And a lot of them really, really don't want to be a CEO because they don't know what it is. They want to create stuff. That's not necessarily a CEO. But anyway, I don't know if that
Yeah,
answers the question. I could go on for hours on this.
yeah, and that totally makes sense and understandable. And when it comes to the moment in your coaching career that actually made you realize you truly are making an impact on others, what was that?
Well, when people get back to me after working with me for several months and say, look, it's great. I just got this new job where I transferred over and career's taken off. My family's balanced. Everything's working well. This is great. And we still touch base every once in a while and stuff. That's the credit. That's something that makes me feel good. Okay, it actually worked for them. They really got it. Because a lot of people know kind of where they want to be, what they want to do, but they don't really know how to go about doing it, or they're afraid to take that step. It's difficult. When I was at Harvard, I had 2 kids. My daughter was like 6. My son was like 2 or 3. He was like 3. And I'm saying, what am I going to do? I was going to be a professor, but then TI offered me a job that I get paid more than the chair of the department at Harvard. So I figured, plus it wasn't just money. I just liked, I like creating things. I like working with people, groups of people and stuff like that. So, and it worked out well.
Yeah, I'm glad that it worked out well and you got to where you are today. And so, if you could actually go back and give your younger self one piece of advice before becoming a coach, what would it be?
Um, I think I would have worked more on the sales and marketing side. I mean, I was pretty good in sales and marketing when I was selling a $3 million, high temperature chemical etch system to Intel. And I had to explain the technology, work with the technology. But that's selling something else. But actually selling yourself is it's a different ball game. You're not really selling yourself, you're selling a product. So that took me a while. I should have maybe invested more time in that, just on the nuts and bolts of coaching, I think. That would have been a little bit more helpful.
Yeah, I could see that. That's a good piece of advice. And where can actually those interested in having you as their coach find you and reach you out?
Well, the best way is on LinkedIn. Just Google me on LinkedIn. I had a website, but I took it down. I'm gonna work on changing it and stuff. But I had this website up, but I don't know how important it is. People, LinkedIn is work. You just call me on the phone, we can talk. I mean, I've started working with people which I call for help and stuff. I never looked at their web page. I just called them on LinkedIn. Why read about somebody? We're going to actually talk to them. So.
That's true. So yeah, give him a call, shoot him a text, and just check out his LinkedIn page. And it was great having you be part of the podcast, David. And thank you everyone for listening or watching in on this episode.
And if you have any questions, go ahead and give me a call. Give Sam a call, and wish you all the very best.
Yeah, thank you, David. And see you everyone on the next episode.
Okay, take care.